David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
One of the loudest complaints that we've heard from Donald Trump since the start of the impeachment inquiry, and it's a complaint that his supporters have started parroting as well, is Trump's not getting any due process in this impeachment inquiry. Donald Trump has now chosen to at least initially waive the due process that he has been given, because once again, their complaints aren't based in fact. They are merely whatever they can come up with at the time to try to claim that they are the victims, they are the martyrs, they are the people that are being treated unfairly. Now, at the start, before the impeachment inquiry was even formalized by Democrats, Donald Trump said, I've got no due process here. People around him loved the talking point. They started repeating it ad nauseum. And adults had to explain to Trump and to his followers, well, hold on a second, Donald. Democrats are just deciding whether to do an impeachment inquiry. Due process isn't an issue here. When Democrats formalize an inquiry, which they eventually did, they voted on it. They outlined the limits of the inquiry, and they also outlined the due process that Donald Trump would get. Donald Trump now gets to have that due process if he wants it. Tomorrow, we have impeachment inquiry hearings starting in the House Judiciary Committee. We will be streaming the entire hearing live on our YouTube channel. And Donald Trump is waiving due process by choosing not to participate and choosing not to have any of his attorneys participate. White House lawyer Pat Cipollone has told the House Judiciary Committee Trump isn't going to participate. No lawyers for Trump are going to participate in the first impeachment hearing of the week scheduled for tomorrow. Now, I want to be really clear about something. They, meaning Trumpists, will say, you know, Trump still isn't getting due process because the participation that he's being offered, even if he did it, would be totally skewed and biased because Democrats control the committee. Well, hold on a second. We have two parties in the United States that flip back and forth between controlling the House and the Senate. And the idea that when the other party is in power, you are denied due process by default because they don't agree with your politics is, number one, laughable. But more importantly, that doesn't take into account what due process is. Donald Trump got the due process he wanted. Due process is the normal systems notify you and allow you to have a say and to participate. Trump was notified and given an opportunity to be heard. He is opting not to. He got due process, period. He received, and for now, they may choose to participate later, for now is waiving due process. The president is having to be treated like a little kid. And incredibly, there are people who praise the president simply for not going out of his way to unfairly attack others. That's how the discourse has been debased, where when Trump can avoid insulting someone, he is praised for acting like an adult. It was never about due process, just like it's never actually about any of the things that they say it's about. These are simply ways that they figure out to either try to attack someone else or to play themselves as the victims. And the reaction is always either outrage, demanding an uproar, and then when they're asked to follow through, they decline, like they're doing here. Now they are again shifting to the entire process is unconstitutional to begin with. Why? Well, you might say it's a process outlined in the Constitution. How could it be an unconstitutional process? Well, the latest complaint is it's supposed to happen in the House Judiciary, not in the House Intel Committee where they held hearings 2 weeks ago. Well, tomorrow the hearings start in the House Judiciary. So what's the problem now? Oh, no, it's still unconstitutional. Trump is still being denied due process. They don't want solutions. They don't care about legality. They just want to complain. They just want to be martyrs. They just want victimhood. This really is their strength, just to complain and talk about how everything is so unfair to them. I'm sort of reminded of a guy pretending to be tough while yelling, "Hold me back" to his friends, except his friends aren't really holding him back. He's holding his friend's arms to make it look as though he's being held back. That is a representation visually of what the entire Trump administration has been around these hearings. It's pathetic. And we know the real reason why it wouldn't be good for Donald Trump to participate. He would immediately self-incriminate, as we've said before. Trump saying, I guess it was either early last week, maybe the week before, time is really flying, where Donald Trump said he would be interested in testifying in the impeachment inquiry hearings. Yeah, right. His lawyers would never let him do it, much the same way that they kept him away from Robert Mueller. We will have the full live impeachment hearings starting tomorrow morning. I believe at 9:30 a.m. Eastern, we will start the hearing starting a half hour later at youtube.com/The David Pakman Show. I hope you will join us. I think that these will be very interesting hearings and also important when it comes to starting to hear from folks in the Trump administration, at least to some degree. And I look forward to it. I hope you'll join me. And of course, I'm sure Donald Trump will be actively tweeting about how everything is just so unfair and how he's the victim throughout the entire process. We'll pick that up tomorrow. It really pains me to have to talk about this today. It really does. But I'm really worried about a faction of my audience. And quite frankly, I'm really worried about the left. And this is not concern trolling. I'm worried because of the response to a video that I did yesterday explaining some unfortunate realities about Medicare for all. I did a video yesterday where I explained in no uncertain terms, we're not getting Medicare for all anytime soon. Now, there are lots of good progressive takes that agree with that. One example is progressive economist Dean Baker's recent comments about Medicare for all. He is a progressive. I had him on the show recently. There was no question about it. I did the video in good faith. I said, listen, I'm for Medicare for all. I believe Medicare for all is the gold standard. I want Medicare for all. I'm not suggesting that we push lame centrist policy because getting Medicare for all will take much longer than some people think. I'm not suggesting that we don't hold our candidates accountable to the gold standard that is Medicare for all. But I explained some unfortunate realities about Medicare for all with the hope that once we all understand these, we can be stronger in our advocacy for better policy as activists, as media people, as voters, people in the audience. The video I did is about 10 minutes long. And I expected that there would be some comments saying, David, you're kind of being a defeatist here, even though it's not what I'm actually doing. But the reaction has been, again, it's just from a piece of my audience. A lot of people understood what I was doing and appreciated it. 3 minutes after the video was published, remember, the video is 10 minutes long. 3 minutes after the video was published, it had 50 dislikes. It's only been 3 minutes. You couldn't possibly have watched the 10-minute video, even if you had it on double time on YouTube. In the 3 minutes, it took 50 people to dislike the video. And there are either people who didn't watch the video at all, or people who just watched it and don't understand what I'm saying, or people making bad faith arguments. But I am very worried because if that is the contingent that the success of our movement depends on, we will lose. And I hate to say that. Let me give you some examples. And again, I'm doing this because I want to win. And I'm worried that there are factions in our movement that are totally misguided in their reactions to people simply saying, hey, guys, we should be aware of this stuff. One example, I'm not surprised David is shilling against Medicare. I actually say in the video, probably close to a dozen times, I'm for Medicare for all. This is either an ignorant or a bad faith comment. Another user responded, Bernie can establish a state of emergency and sign it into law. Trump has set so many precedents. Listen, this is where there is an element of the left that is in a fantasy world. We are not going to get Medicare for all established through a presidential state of emergency. I understand that there's some hypothetical world in which President Bernie Sanders says, our healthcare situation is so bad that I'm declaring a state of emergency. And during that state of emergency, I am going to simply create Medicare for all. And then boom, we will have Medicare for all. It's just unrealistic. Okay, it's not worth even putting energy into that and responding to what I'm talking about by saying, David, Bernie will just declare a state of emergency and create Medicare for all. It's not happening. We are not going to win if that's what we are hoping for or waiting for. Another example, this was a very bad take and a bad faith argument, David. What was bad faith about it? They don't say. This sounds like a Nancy Pelosi speech. Please go back to being more progressive. People liked you more that way. I mean, listen, the show is bigger than ever. It's more than doubled in the last year, but that's not really I actually don't think that's the issue. That doesn't tell us whether I'm right or wrong. The idea that it's a bad faith argument when I'm saying I'm for Medicare for all, we should still push for Medicare for all, we should demand our candidates be for Medicare for all, that is what seems like bad faith to me. Another comment. Okay, so David is basically advocating for centrist policies so that we have a chance in the future. No, I literally say in the video, I am not suggesting that we advocate for centrist policies. I say it in the video. So again, either people aren't listening or they're making bad faith arguments. And lastly, now is the time to unsubscribe from this channel. Do this to be making a point. No progressive should ever be posting against Medicare for all. So again, number one, I say a dozen times in the video, I'm for Medicare for all. But more importantly, that is the sort of black and white thinking, these bogus litmus tests that are not connected to reality. Not only am I for Medicare for all, I'm trying to figure out the right way to get there. One idea I had is it's more likely to start with a state doing Medicare for all. That was one example that I gave. Now, fortunately, I did get some emails from people who took the time to email me and say, David, I know you're going to get crap for this, but you're right. And I think it's good that you're doing it. We need to be more armed with facts so that we can better advocate for what we want. There were a few YouTube comments that seemed to understand what was going on. One who said, these comments show people don't listen to what he's saying. Yeah. Another commenter who said, the comments are depressing. Watch the whole video. He supports Medicare for all. He's talking about strategy here. He's talking about reality. He's right. He's saying it because people need to know the reality. We need realistic expectations and knowledge about how the system works. So listen, I'm not being defeatist. I'm not acting in bad faith. I'm saying a Bernie presidency doesn't get it for us for all of the reasons that I cited yesterday and more. I want it. I think it's the best. Listen to what I'm saying. It's not impossible. It's just way more work, and we need to know that going in. And we aren't going to succeed in any of this if we imagine such delusional things as Bernie will say we have an emergency and put in Medicare for all. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And any time wasted expecting that or suggesting that is time that you are distracting from doing the real work that needs to be done. Prove me wrong. I want to be wrong. Okay, this is one of those things where if in 3 years we have Medicare for all, I will gladly show up and say, you know what? I was skeptical, but I was wrong. You all great activists prove me wrong and we have Medicare for all. I hope that that happens, but it's not going to be closer to a reality if the reaction is, David, you shouldn't even allude to the fact that it might be more difficult than some people are making it out to be. Spend the time advocating for a groundswell of progressive candidates at all levels, all of whom want Medicare for all, so that we can take back the White House and the Senate and governors' mansions and the Supreme Court, which will be crucial in actually getting working Medicare for all. But if the reaction to me being realistic is, David, you're a shill, you're a bad person for doing this, you shouldn't be saying this, I'm now a right winger or a centrist or whatever, we will lose if we attack people who agree with us on policy, not because they even disagree on one policy, but because they differently assess its path to reality. They will crush us. They will crush us. We will lose if that's what we do. Mark my words. We will forget about Medicare for all. Trump will get reelected. We will not get the Senate. It is upsetting to see. And I'll go even further. I've talked before about how our system is set up to prevent people from really activating. What we really need are mass rallies in urban centers. We need to consider strategic defaults to cripple the financial system, mass work call-outs to cripple industry, serious forms of protest. But as I've said before, the system is designed so that no one can afford to do that by keeping wages stagnant, keeping public transit terrible in most places, and the rest of it. We've talked about it before. Let's work together, because the reaction to yesterday's video from this piece of my audience is how we end up accomplishing nothing. And I don't want to accomplish nothing. I am not suggesting we give up on anything. Should we fight for Medicare for all? Yes, we should. Should we always start negotiations from the morally correct position that we actually believe in, which is Medicare for all? Of course. But responding with kill the messenger to, I think some people are missing the reality of how this becomes the law, how this becomes our status quo. It's toxic and it will destroy the left, which I don't want to see. And I would actually argue that the left has already been hurt by this significantly. On the positions, we are already with the majority of the country. Every poll tells us on healthcare, we are with the majority. On gun safety, we are with the majority. One of the reasons, there are many reasons, and many of them are structural and gerrymandering and campaign finance. I get it. But one of the reasons why we have not been more effective is this infighting that exists when someone says, hey, I'm with you on everything except I disagree about how easy you think it's going to be, and here's what we need to know. We're going to lose. We're going to lose, and I don't want to lose. Tell me all the ways that I'm wrong if you can actually keep it issue-based. I'm on Twitter at @dpacman. Leave a reply below. I'm sure that there will be more follow-up about this upcoming.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Thanks to everybody who's been signing up, taking advantage of our Black Friday membership special. I think we are up to close to 250 or 260 new members who signed up using that very special Black Friday coupon code. Thank you so much. Two people in particular I want to thank today, Marshall Fancher and Nellie Katzwinkle. Thanks to both of you. Also, thank you to Antonio Franco, who is today's longtime sustaining member of the day, a member for almost 5 years. Join up in under a minute at joinpakman.com. This is truly bizarre video from a very strange person, the President of the United States. Donald Trump appeared to sort of fake or mimic an orgasm while impersonating Lisa Page during a bizarre rally in Minnesota. This actually happened a couple of weeks ago, but the video is now getting a lot more attention because Lisa Page herself has commented on it. Lisa Page is a former FBI lawyer. She is now speaking out. She did a big interview with the Daily Beast and is being widely quoted. She left the FBI in 2018. Trump went after her very hard. She had an affair with an FBI agent named Peter Strzok, and Trump always talks about Strzok and his lover, Lisa Page, so on and so forth. Again, Lisa Page left the FBI in 2018, May of 2018. Strzok was ultimately fired in August of 2018, and Trump at a rally in Minnesota read text messages between them from 2 years prior. And at one point, Trump pretends to sort of have an orgasm as Lisa Page, which Lisa Page now says was a demeaning fake orgasm. Can you imagine that this is where politics are in 2019? And that Trump mimicking the orgasm was the straw that broke the camel's back. Check out this strange video. It is disturbing, I won't lie. Also pay special attention to the crowd's reaction to all of this.
That was 19 minutes after the oath of office. Months earlier, Peter Strzok. Remember, he and his lover, Lisa Page. What a group. She's going to win. 10 million to 1. She's going to win. I'm telling you, Peter. I'm telling you, Peter, she's going to win. Peter, oh, I love you so much. I love you, Peter. I love you too, Lisa. Lisa, I love you. Lisa. Lisa. Oh, God, I love you, Lisa. And if she doesn't win, Lisa, we've got an insurance policy, Lisa. We'll get that son of a bitch out. We got an insurance policy. And we're living through the insurance policy. That's what it is. The phony Russia hoax.
So there it is. That's a strange one. Some presidents attack their opponent's character. Others focus on policy. Some presidents focus on domestic issues, others on international. I'm not aware of any other presidents ridiculing intelligence agency lawyers by mimicking fake orgasms. It seems new to me. And that aside, a president is attacking and demeaning federal employees, public servants like Lisa Page. That alone is disgusting, and it's an embarrassment to the office of the presidency. But the fake orgasm is just too much. And even beyond that, we expect this from Trump now. but the crowd cheering is really sick. To us, it's shocking, but this is sadly a bigger portion of American society than we probably want to admit. This is one of those things that I think many of us thought we would probably never see, the president reenacting sex in a rally in front of a crowd of his fans, particularly another U.S. citizen who works for the government. It's a sick, sick man. But our society is sick because a room full of people cheered. Yesterday, I played for you a video of that Trump supporter in Florida saying he supports Trump because of family values. Right. Well, this is what he's supporting. And at some point in the future, there will be a documentary of this clip included in some kind of retrospective of the United States of America under Trump, right? And it will be part of our history. One more time for you, that key moment from the video.
I love you, Peter. I love you too, Lisa. Lisa, I love you. Lisa. Lisa. Oh, God, I love you, Lisa.
Now, in his defense, I'm sure Trump has plenty of experience being in rooms where there are fake orgasms, but a rally with a few thousand people just doesn't seem like the right place for this. Things have gotten really, really weird. And my biggest fear about all of this, as I've said before, is the degree to which this type of thing has become normalized. And it has, even if we don't believe that it has for us. For myself, I notice the normalization happening. I notice how I react much less strongly to things that 4 years ago would have been unthinkable to come out of the White House or out of a president. We're all fighting the normalization. And the fear is that it will become so normalized that this guy gets himself reelected in 2020. Speaking of reelection, there is something very unusual happening in the Democratic primary. Republican turned Democrat Michael Bloomberg is instantly polling 6% in one recent poll and an average of 4%, immediately surpassing many candidates who have been in this thing for 6 months, a year, even longer. The new poll in which Michael Bloomberg is polling 6% is from The Hill. Michael Bloomberg is, of course, the turbo billionaire who is somewhere between 10 and 20 times richer than our current billionaire president, Donald Trump. He has actually shaken up the race. If you look at the polling with Bloomberg in the race, you see that in the polls in which Bloomberg is included, there are currently 5 being used to calculate Bloomberg's average of 4%. You see that Joe Biden's support is mostly unchanged, but both Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders' support is down. Tulsi Gabbard has gone from polling 1 to 3 in recent polls to polling just 0 to 2. Kamala Harris is polling as low as 2 once you include Bloomberg, despite having been as high as 5 or 6% in recent polls. There are now discussions that Kamala Harris may soon be exiting this race altogether. So let me get all the normal disclaimers out of the way. I'm not supporting Michael Bloomberg. I already got heat yesterday merely by pointing out that Pete Buttigieg has been climbing in the polls. People saying, David, you're a Buttigieg establishment shill. I'm not supporting Pete. I'm not supporting Michael Bloomberg. I'm simply telling you the numbers. Michael Bloomberg is very quickly having impact that many candidates who have been in this thing for 6 to 12 months have not been able to make. Deval Patrick, when he got into the race, wanted to make at least this level of impact, has failed to do so. And Michael Bloomberg is doing it to a degree. Now, can he make the debates? On the one hand, Bloomberg has until December 12th to qualify on polling and donor numbers. Right now, it is only Biden, Sanders, Warren, Buttigieg, Harris, and Klobuchar. There are 6 people in the next debate. If qualification closed today, Tom Steyer would be out, Tulsi Gabbard would be out, Andrew Yang would be out, Cory Booker and Julian Castro would not make the next debate. And of course, as of today, neither would Bloomberg or Deval Patrick. Bloomberg may easily end up qualifying on polling. The question is going to be donors. And I actually don't know the answer to this. Bloomberg is not even accepting donations. He's financing his own campaign. Can he even make the debate on that basis? Since there is a donor requirement, he may preclude himself from even maybe qualifying because of that. He's been spending millions of dollars on ads. Tons of our viewers have been telling me they're regularly getting Michael Bloomberg ads before our videos on YouTube. The debate itself scheduled for December 19th. So what does this mean for Bloomberg? We have no polling from Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, or South Carolina yet that includes Michael Bloomberg. 6% nationally or 4% nationally is not going to mean much if he can't make any headway in any of those first four primaries. I see Iowa as a very tough one for Michael Bloomberg. New Hampshire is maybe more of a possibility. Nevada and South Carolina are certainly question marks. But imagine being in this race for months and months, and then you see Bloomberg enter, and now you're instantly losing to him. Like if I were working for Kamala Harris or Andrew Yang, Amy Klobuchar, Cory Booker, Tulsi Gabbard, Julian Castro, you just can't seem to get past 1, 2, 3%. In Harris's case, she actually was up to 11 or 12% at one point, but has just fallen apart. And then you see Michael Bloomberg come in and he's averaging 4% and getting 6% in one poll. I would be extremely demoralized if I were the candidates, if I were working on their campaigns. I don't work on political campaigns, but that's my sense of it. No doubt this is going to hugely encourage Michael Bloomberg. If he makes that next debate, I wouldn't be surprised to see him get quite a bit of face time merely for being able to get this level of support in just a few weeks after announcing. This does not, by the way, seem like a particularly fun time to be an Elizabeth Warren supporter. She has been in free fall, as I told you yesterday, for several weeks. Now with Michael Bloomberg in and climbing, I can't imagine this is what Elizabeth Warren and her supporters want to see. Where will we be 2 weeks from now? No idea. Absolutely no idea. This is a primary that is very quickly taking on some different dynamics, to say the least. And I wouldn't be surprised if everything reverses in the next 2 weeks and we simply see Warren, Bernie, Biden recover and be very clearly the only people in frontrunner status. Or we may see Buttigieg continue to climb. We may see Michael Bloomberg get more traction. I have no idea. And of course, for Michael Bloomberg, the possibility of making that next debate, if indeed it is even a possibility, given that he is financing his own campaign, will be a big factor in how this thing plays out. Let me know what you think. We'll have a poll on our Instagram page about this at David Pakman Show. And while you're there, follow me on Instagram as well at david.pakman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's great to welcome to the program today Wendy Brown, who's a professor of political science at UC Berkeley and also author most recently of In the Ruins of Neoliberalism, The Rise of Anti-Democratic Politics in the West. Wendy, so great to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
So first, just so we're all hopefully working with the sort of same definition of neoliberalism, I think it's a much understood and debated term. In the context that you write about it, what are the important tenets that define neoliberalism?
So just to be clear to start with, because I do think it's confusing to many Americans.
Yes.
By neoliberalism, the original neoliberals, Milton Friedman, Friedrich Hayek, and others, were referring to a modification of economic liberalism. And I only want to make that clear because still so many Americans imagine that it has something to do with our notion of political liberalism, where it has to do with more equality, more social spending, more state, and so forth. And it's just the opposite. Neoliberalism, as the founding fathers of it thought about neoliberalism, meant taking the basic principles of economic liberalism, that is, unregulated markets, maximized competition, and modifying those. And the modifications that they imagined and that actually have come to be involved two things. One, understanding that markets are not necessarily natural, even if they're good, so they need a lot of state support. They don't need state intervention, but they need state support. They need the state oriented to the issue of making markets work and making markets thrive. And the other thing that they did to modify the original Adam Smith notions of liberalism had to do with bringing traditional morality into the picture, understanding that not just markets, but also morals were what ought to be organizing social life, cultural life, familial life, and so forth. And the reason I emphasize that is that so many of us talk about neoliberalism just as a set of economic policies, but we need to understand that it also has this other dimension, a dimension that, of course, has really come to the fore as we think about contemporary political life.
Yeah, I mean, what was the trajectory of that in history? Because it's not necessarily obvious that what starts as a set of economic principles would eventually come to encompass a particular view about so-called, traditional family values, or that it would dictate certain foreign policy, as often is a part of discussions about neoliberal versus other points of view. What was the trajectory through which those elements became wrapped up in this sort of bigger understanding of neoliberalism in the last 20 or 30 years?
The fundamental attack that neoliberalism makes on the social state, on Keynesianism, on practices of social justice that have to do with legislation of the good. The fundamental attack that neoliberalism makes is this. It says, better that what we have is just organically developed morality and markets organizing society. And that means less democratic legislation. In fact, the neoliberals were extremely suspicious of and really tried to modify and diminish the extent to which legislatures in electoral democracies should do anything other than just set general laws for people. So they really wanted legislators out of the social justice business, out of the market regulation business, and certainly out of the taxation business. So those two things come together, morality and market, in the attack that neoliberals make on democratic ways of deciding how we should live together, how much equality we should have, how much inclusion we should have, how we ought to deal with things like gender power, racial power, class power, and so forth. All of those the neoliberals wanted left alone so that traditional morality and markets could govern our lives. And they believed that that would maximize freedom and maximize the good, maximize a good society.
Yeah, one of the things that is interesting to me, as I understand it, and I'm curious if you believe that the same kind of inherent contradiction exists, is that in a lot of the ideology that's espoused about neoliberalism and these free market, less regulation, increasing freedom, the language is very much about getting out of the way to allow more liberty to exist. But in practice, that getting out of the way, to the extent that it exists, and of course it's much more complicated than that, can actually allow a lot of different types of authoritarianism to take hold in different ways. Is that a contradiction that you agree exists there?
Well, for them, it's not a contradiction for the following reason. For us, it seems that way. How come what starts as a project or a program of freedom ends up in the kind of authoritarianism that we see in the Bolsonaro regime? Many of us argue is taking shape under Trump and Erdogan and so forth.
Yes.
But for inside a neoliberal frame, the thinking goes like this. It's okay to have strong states as long as you maximize individual liberty. Strong states are the way that you will ensure that individuals can engage in market conduct and have the moral life, the social life that they choose. But what a state must not do is intervene in individual freedoms. So to put this in fairly simple language, what neoliberals thought was all right was a form of what we might call authoritarian liberalism. That is, a strong state making decisions indifferent to what we call the checks and balances and three branches of government and all of that. A strong state making decisions, but leaving alone private life, leaving alone individual life. And that's what really distinguishes the authoritarian liberalism taking shape today and that many on the right support from classic fascism.
Yeah, and well, the other thing that's interesting to me there is there's a lot of overlap between that ideology and sort of what we might consider traditional right libertarianism, not social libertarianism, but right libertarianism.
Exactly.
Except when it comes to foreign policy, neoliberalism has been much more interventionist than the right libertarians at least claim that they would be. I don't know that they've ever really gotten a shot to show us how non-interventionist they would be. But that in practice seems to be a very big distinguishing factor. Despite the talk of freedom and the individual liberty being the most important form of it, neoliberalism has been extraordinarily interventionist in terms of foreign policy.
Correct. Now, here again, just if I'm to try to explain what neoliberals think they're doing, what they imagine they're trying to do is create a world of global free trade. Now, what's happening right now is another story with the trade wars and so forth. But what the classic neoliberal foreign policy advocates thought they were doing, for example, in Iraq, regime change in Iraq, and then neoliberalize the society, make it into part of the global order of, among other things, debt financing and free trade and so forth. So you're absolutely right that they understand a highly interventionist foreign policy as part of what is bringing about the neoliberal order. But there's one other area that I would emphasize where the kind of markets and morals program of the neoliberals seems to really intervene in individual liberty. And that's, of course, reproductive freedom and LGBT rights. And again, the official thinking here is, well, that has to do with the moral order. These things go against traditional morality, which is tried and true and belongs part and parcel with a free market society. So it's slippery there, but there you really do have a contradiction. Lots of intervention in the freedom of women and non-normative sexualities saying, no, you can't do that.
There is we could call it the hope among many on the American left that socially democratic ideas that are similar to those of the Scandinavian economies, Northern Europe, et cetera, are experiencing maybe a resurgence, a renaissance of sorts, or maybe approaching something new that maybe we've not even seen before in the United States. And that the rise of those ideas will necessarily push out some of the neoliberal framework that has been the status quo for a long time. Is it as clear as if one goes up, the other goes down? Is it more complicated than that? Do you even agree that that's actually a trend that we're now seeing?
I do think that there has been a fairly robust challenge to neoliberal ideas really since the 2008 finance capital meltdown. I mean, that was the beginning of the end of a broad endorsement of free markets, privatization, minimal social state, depression of progressive taxation. The post-2008 rethink went beyond Occupy, although Occupy really embodied it. And what we need to remember is that however limited the actual time frame of Occupy Wall Street, what it did was begin to change the conversation about inequality, about access to public education, higher education, about banks being given free rein to do whatever they wanted, about bailing out the banks but not the foreclosed homeowners, and so forth. So with that conversation now changed, you get the rise of Bernie Sanders and in turn AOC and Elizabeth Warren and so forth, such that I would actually agree that what you have is a fairly robust challenge now to neoliberal economic ideas, but I would say a little bit less savvy on the part of the left about the extent to which neoliberalism is also bound up with this idea that the state should stay out of the moral realm, by which is meant the social justice realm. Again, the left has certainly been robust on the subject of arguing for gender rights, LGBT rights, Black civil rights, endorsing all kinds of social movements. But I do think it's the part of the story that's more complicated is taking apart that broad belief that neoliberalism set into the bones of society, that it's best for the state to be out of the business of social justice, redistribution, social spending, and all the rest, and to just let those things be handled individually. So to compress the point, I do think that we have a pretty major challenge now to neoliberal economic thinking, but maybe not a full grasp of the way that what I call neoliberal reason has really come to organize a lot of our understanding of society and what's appropriate for democratic legislation.
Yeah, I've also found the challenge to be less robust when it comes to foreign policy. I mean,
Yeah.
you do hear, hey, we shouldn't be getting it. We're not the world's policemen. We should be getting out of here, there, the other place. But it's been a less sort of nuanced and well thought out challenge. I don't know if you would agree.
I totally agree. And I think that in many ways in the United States, Trump has really confused the left in its own rethinking, its own thinking about foreign policy, because he stands now for what the anti-imperial left used to stand for, which is get out of the endless wars, don't be the world's policeman. Of course, he's trying to do all kinds of things at the level of trade, and still engaged in massive, what we could call neo-colonial condemnation of all kinds of nations and practices. But the withdrawal that has typically been the stance of many on the left has really, I think, not been fully come to terms with by the left, to think about, okay, where does the left stand on the question of joining together with others in the world, not just to solve climate change, not just to get institutions of political economy right, but also to right wrongs. Where are we with human rights discourse? Where are we with humanitarian intervention? And the left has gone super quiet on those subjects.
Absolutely fascinating. We've been talking with Wendy Brown, who's professor of political science at UC Berkeley, most recently author of In the Ruins of Neoliberalism, The Rise of Anti-Democratic Politics in the West. Wendy, such a pleasure having you on. I appreciate your time.
David, it was good to talk to you. Thank you.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So I was checking out the president's tweets yesterday, and I noticed Donald Trump say, quote, "Great job by Congressman Doug Collins of Georgia over the weekend in representing the Republican Party and myself against the impeachment hoax." And I thought, what the heck? Let's see what Trump's talking about. If he liked it, it must be really weird. And case in point, Republican Congressman Doug Collins was on Fox News Sunday over the weekend, and it is everything that we could have imagined and more. Doug Collins goes on the strangest word salad in defense of Donald Trump, and it makes such little sense that I actually decided to transcribe it for you, which we will put up on the screen momentarily. This is what Donald Trump liked from Doug Collins.
The fact of, is there corruption? So I do not spend dollars that I don't need to spend in the Ukraine because of corruption that was still there.
Okay,
this is an issue.
Let me just ask you a thought experiment. Just bear with me for a minute. Okay. If you believed that the president had used the power of his office to try to get Ukraine to interfere with our elections, if you believe that, would that be an impeachable offense?
I do not believe it, so that I'm not going to answer a hypothetical in which is designed to simply say that the president did something improper. Chris, he did nothing improper. There was nothing about a problematic giving aid to another country in which you're talking about corruption, which he's required to do by law. And it just so happened that a presidential candidate's son, who was getting a massive amount of money from a company that had been under investigation, in which even other witnesses that have been favorable, quote, to the Democrats in the investigation, have said needed to be looked at. This is a problem of overall proportion, but there's nothing here that the president did wrong. And this is the thing that we're going to move forward on.
Okay.
Yeah, so you really have to look at a transcript to see how whacked this is. And I transcribed it. Take a look with me. This is what Doug Collins said, quote, "I do not believe it so that I'm not going to answer a hypothetical in which is designed to simply say that the president did something improper. Chris, he did nothing improper. There's nothing about a problematic giving aid to another country in which you're talking about corruption, which he's required to do by law. And he just so happened that a presidential candidate's son, who is getting in a massive amount of money from a company that had been under investigation, in which me, even other witnesses that have been for favorable quote to the Democrats in the investigation, have said needed to be looked at. Sorry. This is a problem of overall proportion, but there's nothing here that the president did wrong. And this is the thing that we're going to move forward on. I have no idea what this guy's talking about. If anybody knows what he's talking about, let me know. Now, I understand he's defending Trump and he's suggesting that Donald Trump did nothing wrong. Like, I understand the tone of it, but I don't know what the hell this guy's talking about. Now, it's possible that he and Donald Trump both speak whatever language that is, which is why some people understood what Trump meant by Cobfefi, and Trump presumably understands what this guy said. But it's got to be just the tone. It seemed like this guy was strongly defending Trump, and I guess that's good enough for Donald Trump. There's nothing about a problematic giving aid to another country in which you're talking about corruption, which he's required to do by law. And I started thinking to myself, what has happened to education in our country? What has happened to critical thinking in our country? But Doug Collins went to college. He also has a master's degree, sort of. It's a master's in divinity from some seminary, but still, it's a master's degree. Doug Collins is a lawyer. He has a law degree. And this incoherent word salad, defense of Donald Trump, is the best that he was able to muster up. Either something is very wrong with Doug Collins, or he's simply struggling to defend the indefensible and his brain couldn't handle it. So it resorted to something as nonsensical as this and what you just heard. The saddest thing about all of this is that people who want to defend Donald Trump will watch this video and they won't understand it because it doesn't make any sense, of course. And they'll say to themselves, this Doug Collins guy, he seems super smart and I just don't really understand politics. He must just be talking in a way that is above my head. I'm sure he's making sense, many Trumpists will assume, despite the fact that this guy is making no sense whatsoever, but it'll be enough for them. A strong defense of Donald Trump. Trump was happy with it. Doug Collins seemingly pleased with it, even though it makes no sense whatsoever. That's what Trump liked. That's what Trump found to be a great job done by Congressman Doug Collins. The discourse has been debased. And I'm worried there is no return, at least no return anytime soon. Facebook, of course, is increasingly a bad actor in the world of disseminating truth, of prioritizing fact over propaganda, in the world of limiting the destructive effect of actual fake news and lies on the internet. I don't mean fake news the way Trump uses it, which is any news he doesn't like. I mean actual disinformation propaganda. Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg imploded recently when he was questioned by Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez a few weeks ago. We covered it for you. And it's getting worse because we learned not long ago that Donald Trump and Mark Zuckerberg had a meeting. Now, it was initially a secret meeting in the sense that it didn't appear on Donald Trump's schedule anywhere. Facebook didn't report that this meeting between Trump and Zuckerberg had taken place. Eventually, news of the meeting did surface thanks to an NBC News report. And of course, only then did Facebook say, well, yeah, we did actually have that meeting. And it was actually back in October when Zuckerberg had that terrible appearance before Congress. So Mark Zuckerberg appears on CBS This Morning yesterday and is interviewed by Gayle King. Gayle King asks him about the meeting, and Zuckerberg devolves into just meaningless stuttering, visibly uncomfortable. It is not good. It is not good. Take a look.
You were in D.C. recently. It was reported later that you had dinner with the president of the White House. What was the nature of the meeting? Can you say?
Sure. I mean, we talked about a number of things that were on his mind and some of the topics that you'd read about in the news around our work.
We talked about a number of things and topics in the news. Super clear, Mark. Crystal clear. I totally understand it. And she tried to follow up on the question, and it actually gets even worse.
People would say the optics weren't good. Did he try to lobby you in any way?
No. I mean, I don't think that's. I think some of the stuff that people talk about or think gets discussed, and these discussions are not really how that works. I also want to respect that it was a private dinner, right, and it's a private discussion.
Did he lobby you? No. Some stuff, people talk about things that, it's not always as discussed. So I get it. It was a private meeting. That's not a defense, though. That's actually part of the problem as I see it. Donald Trump is publicly talking about Facebook should do this, Facebook should do that, Facebook should not do this other thing. Zuckerberg testifies before Congress on exactly the same issues. It's a train wreck that gives off vibes that this is truly a terribly bad faith actor. They keep the meeting not just private, but secret. They're outed. And then he says a meaningless word salad and says, it was a private meeting anyway, so I have to be careful. Now, I do actually think that Donald Trump and Zuckerberg probably did not plan nefarious things in the meeting. I don't think it's that explicit. I mean, they may be nefarious in some ways, but if you're imagining this cartoonish secret meeting where they're whispering about all of the nefarious things they're going to do on Facebook to help Donald Trump, I don't think that anything that cartoonish or dramatic took place. This is just how the hubs of power continue chugging along. Peter Thiel was also at the meeting, which only raises even more red flags. That's a story for another day. If you don't know who Peter Thiel is, I envy you. That's great. Now, let me propose one thing that would be maybe the only thing that makes Mark Zuckerberg's word salad answer a little bit less disturbing. Trump often doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, and nobody around him does. Is it possible that the reason Mark Zuckerberg struggled to say what was discussed is because he didn't understand what on earth Donald Trump was talking about? Is that maybe why he was unable to answer Gayle King's question? I'm kidding sort of mostly, but who knows? My guess is that the topics from that meeting will ultimately play a role in the 2020 election. There's too much at stake right now. The dynamics, the power dynamics of what a platform like Facebook can do when it comes to influencing elections by virtue of what they do and don't allow, the stakes are extremely high. And I would be shocked if whatever was discussed between Trump and Zuckerberg doesn't ultimately play a role in the 2020 election. Let me know what you think was talked about. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. So this voicemail relates to a video I played for you yesterday in which maybe the most delusional Trump supporter we've ever encountered said that he's with Trump because of family values and integrity of character and so on and so forth. And we said, family values and Trump, that doesn't seem to make any sense. This caller who called our voicemail number says we're not understanding what Republicans mean by family values. Take a listen to this.
Yeah, and I can't believe you don't already know this. When Republicans talk about family values, that means, I hate gays, I hate abortion, I hate birth control, I hate women's rights, I hate marijuana legalization, and I'm going to put as many pot smokers in jail as I can. That's their family values right there.
Right. I guess I just misunderstood when that Trump voter said he's with Trump because of his family values. I guess I was thinking of reasonable family values. But if you go by that, here's the thing. Even if you go by that, Trump is lying. I mean, listen, Trump's been for women's rights when it comes to abortion for his entire life until he started running for president. Trump is for contraception. He's only even pretending in the least believable possible way to have changed his mind on those things. But maybe you're right. Maybe the caller is absolutely right about this. We've got a great bonus show for you today. We will talk about another one of these supposedly inspirational stories. This one's about a McDonald's employee who's 92 and still working. I find the story to be dystopian, not an inspirational story. We will also talk about Prince Charles looking at reducing the number of royals and what's behind it and what it would mean, and much more. Great bonus show today. Hope to speak to you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.